Greetings, everyone. So today I want to go and have a little mini rant, and it's not an aggressive one, it's not an angry one, just about things that happen in church etiquette that I don't think should be happening. The first one is slightly frustrating. It doesn't happen regularly, it doesn't happen often, but it happens from time to time, and I don't think it should. Okay, so Ash Wednesday recently, I went up to the line to get my ash, and by the way, this has happened also when I've gone to communion, but in this case it was getting the ashes on Ash Wednesday. So I go up to get my ash. I join the line, then I go around to go back into my seat, and there's a woman plumped in my seat. She didn't seem elderly, she didn't seem handicapped, she didn't seem like she had any health issues or problems walking or standing. Now, again, I shouldn't assume, maybe she did, but I think she just saw an empty seat and sat there. Folks, if you're going to find yourself a seat in church, maybe don't do it when people are all getting in line to communion or to get their ashes, because that's probably when you're going to find loads of empty seats. I don't know if it's common practice that we should be leaving our bags or items in the seats so no one sits in them, but I thought it was fairly obvious that when communion is taking place, a lot of people will leave their seats and then suddenly there will be a lot of empty seats, and that doesn't mean those seats are free. Now, of course, I didn't say anything, I didn't do anything, I just found another seat. I didn't think it was a big deal to raise during a mass, but I thought it was a little bit inconsiderate, particularly if, for example, it might not have been me, it might have been an elderly person or someone who actually does need to sit down, who had gone to communion, for example, or in this case, to get their ashes, and then they return and they see someone sitting in their seat, and it's a bit strange. So I don't know if you've had that happen to you. I've had it a few times where I've gone previously to communion, and then when I've come back, oh look, there's someone sitting in my seat, and it's honestly often it's not been someone who looks like they need to sit down. It's been like a younger person, or there was like a mum once with a child, but the mum wasn't that old and the child seemed fine to stand. So that's one thing. A second thing is when you bring your children to church. Okay, I understand bringing your children to church. I like seeing children in church. I kind of feel like, yeah, we're getting them started early, going to church. It's all great. And I know children play up, and I know children, sometimes they cry and they make a noise, etc. That's understandable. The part that bothers me slightly is when parents seem to be completely focused on their children during the mass and not actually paying attention to the mass. So you'll see a parent, for example, sitting in a pew or on a bench and just kind of with the child, talking to the child, giving it toys, just constantly all the child, as if it's like childcare, not paying any attention to the mass. Or even worse, when the child starts wandering around in the church and the parent is following that child around but not doing anything. Like it's not saying don't do that so that you can't walk over there. It's not taking it back. It's just following it. The child, just oh yeah, just go climb on that bench, yeah, hit that man's leg, go wherever you want. I'll just follow you around and make sure you're okay. It just doesn't seem right during a service. I've seen instances where a mother or a father the child has gone up like to the altar, and then the parent has followed them, taken them away from the altar because obviously it can't start climbing up onto the altar. They go back with them, then they let them go, and the child goes back up to the altar again. The parent follows them, takes them back, and this just seems to repeat in a cycle. Uh, and you think after the first time, the parent will go, okay, I'm going to keep hold of my child now because it's going to keep doing this. But it's almost like it's fun for the parent to just keep going back, going up to the altar and taking the child again. And you do sometimes see that because it's in front of you, because you're there and you can see all of that taking place. It's a little bit annoying. I know it's not easy. I know, and I've mentioned this before when I've spoken to Catholics, and some people don't like that, particularly parents. I'm not a parent yet, and they don't like it when you say that because they feel like, well, I'm bringing my child. What can I do? I understand that, but I just think there's ways. If the child is old enough, like not a baby, you can maybe explain where you're going, where we are going together. Tell the child that this is important. You have to behave yourself. And honestly, if the child doesn't behave itself, there are areas usually in most churches where you can go off with that child and just to the side somewhere at the back. They usually have little rooms where you can take that child to just cool off, calm down, and not disturb the service. The third thing is talking before Mass. Now, this is something that I have been guilty of in the past, and I never used to think was an issue because I would think, well, the Mass hasn't begun yet, so what's the problem with having a little conversation with someone in the pew before it starts? But I remember some time ago I went to a Latin Mass. I don't do that too often, but I went to a Latin Mass in central London. And there's an entrance to the church, and then there's like a little sort of corridor passageway area, and then there's the next double doors that lead to actually where the mass is going to take place. And we were in that corridor area, so we weren't even inside the bit where people are sitting waiting for the mass. And we were just chatting about something actually to do with the mass, with the service. And this lady, she opened those double doors and she was like, shh. And at the time I thought, oh, come on, we're not even speaking loudly or anything. But then I suppose I could understand her, because people do pray before Mass, or they just reflect, or they want to sit in silence and think about God, or sometimes they'll pray, in their head, and they'll do various different things. And people talking while they're doing that is disturbing. So I do agree with that kind of frustration. I think when you're in church, that's it. You should stop talking unless you really need to. I know sometimes there might be something happens and you really need to say something, but generally, I think people should, once they enter a church, even if it's 15 minutes before Mass, just not talk anymore. And that's something that I was convinced about recently. And one more thing I want to add that's not really to do with church etiquette, but I thought I'd throw it in because it's something that's happened to me recently. So I've been going to confessions. I've been trying to go regularly to confession. And obviously, we tend to go to confession to churches where the priests don't know us, right? That's just what a lot of people do. I know they say it's actually good to have the same priest confessing you who knows you, because then he can understand your situation better. I've heard that said, but I still think most people would rather not, and I don't. But I went to this church a few times now where there's lots of priests confessing. Actually, there's quite a few of them because it's actually a cathedral. There's quite a few of them. And this is the penance that I got for the last few times that I went. A couple of times I think it was the same priest, and then it was another priest. It was this was the penance. 2 Hail Marys. One time it was 3. Usually it was 2. Now, like I'm sure many of you, pray the rosary every day. I'm not bragging. A lot of people pray the rosary, but I do pray the rosary every day. That's 53 Hail Marys. 2 Hail Marys doesn't seem like a penance. But in that situation, I don't know what to do. Should I say to the priest, Father, I actually pray the rosary every day. This doesn't seem like much of a penance to me. I don't know if that would be rude. Should I add my own? Should I kind of go, okay, I'll do this, but then I'll do some more because I feel like this isn't a penance. 2 Hail Marys, I mean, I do it. When he says it, the priest says it, I do it. But I have felt like, this doesn't feel in any way like it's exerting me, like I'm having to put some effort into this at all. 2 Hail Marys, how long does that take? Like 25 seconds? I mean, it doesn't take long. Maybe not 25. I mean, you shouldn't rush through them, but it takes less than a minute for sure to do 2 Hail Marys. So yeah, that's something that's been happening. Maybe people will say, well, why don't you go somewhere else then where they're going to give you some more harsh penances, if that word, penances. But yeah, I don't know what to make of that. If you have any opinions, let me know. I just do the penance. I haven't been adding my own on top of that because I felt this was the penance the priest gave me, so I'll just do that. But I don't know, what would you do in that situation? Would you just do it? Would you say anything to the priest? Would you add something of your own extra just to make it a little bit harder for yourself, I suppose? And that's it. That's all I got to say in this video. Thank you very much for watching, and hopefully see you again soon.